Hello, brothers and sisters. Welcome back to our red letter study. But we are still in Matthew 25. After this great Olivet discourse, end times, Christ's return, and how everybody will have to give an account to him. Yeah, we see that through one teaching passage and two well known parables in Matthew 25. We already saw the 10 virgins, and I dared to question some of the interpretations and say that this is not about trying to get more of the Spirit as a Christian. This is about, do you have the Spirit or do you not? Because when he comes back, it's too late. And this has now led us to this next parable. Or again, we keep in mind, this is about this moment when we come before the Lord. I said it's another well-known parable, the one about the talents. There's very different variations of it. In one, there's 10 talents, 10 people, and each get one. In the other one, the one we're going to look at, there's only 3 people, and they get different numbers of talents. But it's technically the same story with the same point, and we can't ever forget that. Parables have one main teaching. Christ is revealing one great truth about the kingdom through the parables. And we can't get bogged down about the details. That's the big mistake. So, with all that said, let's try to figure out what's going on in this second parable, shall we? We begin. For it will be like a man going on a journey who called his servant and entrusted them his property. That little phrase is important. It starts us all off, right? For it will be like. What is going to be like? Like what? Well, this connects us right back to the beginning of this chapter, this section, where he talked about the upcoming kingdom, right? This moment when he's going to come back and everybody's going to come before him. And some will be fools and some will be wise. Some will enter, some will be left out. And I'm saying, okay, let's talk about this again. Basically what he's saying, for it will be like, he's saying, let me just try to show you another image of it. And that's important. This parable is still talking about that moment when we get before him. Which is why when he says here, his servants, we are so quick to say, clearly this is about being disciples in the church. I don't think so. I will show you why at the end. But I don't believe this is about disciples using their gifts within the church. Yeah. I know I'm going to get myself in trouble for that one. But again, this is all about this moment when we will come before him. So these servants, I will dare say it's all of humanity. And I will try to show that to you. But we begin. Well, we continue. To one he gave 5 talents. To another 2. To another 1. To each according to his ability. Then he went away. He who had received the 5 talents went at once and traded with them. And he made 5 talents more. So also, he who had the 2 talents made 2 talents more. But he who had received the 1 talent went and dug it in the ground and hid his master's money. Now after a long time, the master of those servants came and settled accounts with them. I want to focus on the last phrase to begin with, actually. Long time. This will remind us again that first parable, where he says that the bridegroom was tarrying, he was taking a long time. Because again, Jesus, when he finally will leave, it hasn't happened yet, but will leave, it's going to take a long time before he comes back. We're about 2,000 years more, and he still hasn't. But there is going to be a day where we'll have to settle account, where everyone will have to give an account. Believers and unbelievers will have to give an account to God for the lives we live, right? The great judgment seat. It's not just for Christians, it's for unbelievers. But we get back to the talents now. The fact is, many people have said many things about what the talents are. The spiritual gifts, or natural abilities, or and so forth and so on. But the fact is, Jesus doesn't tell us. See, he doesn't want us to get bogged down on the details. He uses money amount. That's it, a talent. I've even learned that it's equal to about 1,000 denarii. Denarii were the amount for 1 day's wage. So 1,000 days' wage. He gets 5 of them. 5,000. He gets 2, and he only gets 1,000. But again, what does he mean by talents? We can't think in our English way of thinking, well, a talent is just that, a talent, an ability. No, it's money here. Now, I will suggest an idea, and we'll see if it pans out, that the talent is actually the gospel. And we saw last time, I dare to argue that this idea of bringing the oil was not about getting more of the Spirit, but more about having the Spirit. About being anointed or accepted by God. In other words, sealed by the Spirit. Or not being. Well, here I'm going to argue that the talent here is the gospel itself. And some are able to share it in incredible ways, right? They get 5 talents out of it. Others are a bit less able to understand it and share it. 2 talents. What I mean by understand it, I mean that some really go into the depth of what the gospel is. And others say more on the surface of it. And yet you get that other guy. And notice what he does with that talent, right? He dug it in the ground. That's what he does with it. As you think of people who receive the gospel, you tell them about Jesus, and they, okay, thank you, and they throw it away. But they put it in the ground. They heard the message. They can even recite it. I've heard unbelievers share the gospel. Yeah. Be able to recite our gospel message, the 4 points, or whatever you want to call it. Which is, I know the 4 points are not the gospel, but still, they can say it. But they still just threw it to the ground. They still just hide it away. They don't believe it or want to share it to others. But, okay, let's put it on the shelf. We continue our story because the master has come back. And he who received the 5 talents came forward, bringing 5 talents more, saying, Master, you delivered to me 5 talents. Here, I have made 5 talents more. His master said to him, now listen to that. Well done, good and faithful servant. You have been faithful over a little. I will set you over much. Enter into the joy of your master. And he also, who had the 2 talents, came forward saying, Master, you delivered to me 2 talents. Here, I have made 2 more. His master said to him, what? Well done, good and faithful servant. You have been faithful over a little. I will set you over much. Enter into the joy of your master. My focus, of course, will be specifically on the master's answer. Because, again, we don't want to get bogged down of the fact that they made more money and everything. It's not, the details aren't important. But his answer is, I think, right? Well done, good and faithful servant. We know that expression. We long for it when we enter into heaven, when we get before him. That he will tell us, good and faithful servant. Same thing for that other expression. It's one that Jesus uses in other times too. You've been faithful over little, I'll set you over much. Now, this necessary meaning will rule over cities in heaven. I don't know. And honestly, I don't care. I don't. That's important. Being with God, that's important. Being in glory, that's important. But like I said, Jesus has spoken on this before. Those who are faithful in little will be given to be faithful into more, into much more. A very simple principle, biblical principle. Instead of aiming for that super mega ministry that so many are doing more and more, why not just be faithful to the little things God put before you right now? The people. That guy in the pew, he seems sad, go talk to him. You know? Or the little needs of the church. Nobody's doing this, nobody's doing that. Well, that's too bad. Do it. Yep. Faithful in the little things. But I digress. The last one is the best. Enter into the joy of your master. We should be thinking of how the other parable ended. Right? The wise virgins entered into the home, while the others were left out. Enter into the joy of your master. Enter into glory. Enter into joy unspeakable. That's what I'm hearing here. You get to come in. You get to enjoy this reality of heaven, or I should say the New Jerusalem, with me forever. What about the other guy? Yeah, good question. Let's go see. He also, who had received the 1 talent, came forward saying, Master, I knew you to be a hard man, reaping where you did not sow, and gathering where you scattered no seed. So I was afraid. And I went and hid your talent in the ground. Here, ye have what is yours. That expression, that attitude, I knew you to be a hard man, makes me think of, 2 types of people. The unbelievers, who are just critical of God, who are always attacking God. Even those who say they're atheists will attack God they don't believe exists. Right? They see him as a hard God. God's good where he isn't doing anything. But even those who profess Christ for a moment, right? They raised their hand, they prayed the prayer, but then they start realizing, wait, the Christian life is difficult. And there's moralities involved, and ways of life, and people are mean sometimes in the church. This whole following Jesus thing is hard. Nobody told me there was a cost to pay here. Right? Jesus did, though, but I digress. That sounds like their attitude. Right? I guess the professors and the falling away from the faith, and those who just throw away the gospel itself, they just see our Lord as hard. Well, here's his answer to all of this. But his master answered him, "You wicked and slothful servant, you knew that I reap where I have not sown, and gathered where I scattered no seed. Then you ought to have invested my money with the bankers. And at my coming, I should have received what was mine with interest. So take the talent from him and give it to the one who has the 10 talents." Honestly, this whole section for me speaks just so much the fact that we should not get bogged down by the details of parables. What does it all mean in a palpable way? Right? Is Jesus actually saying, "You're right, I'm evil"? God say that? No. Or what's the banker? What does that mean, the banker with interest? And even this one, the last one, take what's his and give it to the one who has 10 talents. They all get to keep the money? Not because at the end, right? If it is about gifting and abilities, we give those crowns back to Jesus because it's because of him. We don't get to keep them and get others people crowns as well. No, there's a sense with all this is just filler. It just helps give sense to a story, so it won't sound so weird. But the application, though, that's coming up. Just like the other one, at the end, we understand it. 4, right? Here's the purpose. To everyone who has, will more be given, and he will have an abundance. But for the one who has not, even what he has will be taken away. And cast the worthless servant into the outer darkness. In that place, there will be weeping and gnashing of teeth. What does he mean? Well, he speaks like that in other places as well. And I would dare say, I could be wrong, that it seems to point to the reality of the Gentiles and the Jews. That those who will receive eternal life by grace, right, through faith, they'll have abundantly more. He came to give his life for his sheep and to give it in abundance. They don't deserve it, and they'll get so much more of it. For those who don't, like his Jewish audience right now, that for the most case, will reject this message. They will mock it, they'll walk away. Not all, some will become believers. Right? We know that the Jews were the first part of the church for a long time in the primitive church, but we're talking about, for the most part, Israel did reject the Messiah. And even what even what he has or they had will be taken away, their religion. In a few short years after this, there is no Jewish religion, according to the scripture, I mean. They've kept something cobbled together, but there's no temple, no sacrificial system to make atonement before God. It's all been taken away from them. The little bit they had, the old covenant, because they didn't want to embrace the new thing that God was doing, they lost that too. Now, again, not trying to talk about replacement theology or that, that's not even close to it. It's just saying, Jesus is saying, I'm giving salvation through grace, and so we'll have abundance of it, and others who want to hold to their thing will have nothing at the end. That's, I believe, is the meaning here. But the other one is even clearer, right? I mean, place of utter darkness, a place where there's weeping and gnashing of teeth. Jesus clearly tells us that's hell. That's eternal damnation. So, does that mean that believers, disciples, who don't do enough go to hell? Some actually do preach something very similar to that. right? Preaching the gospel of salvation usually has to do about if you're not doing enough. No, the Bible doesn't teach that. I don't believe it for a second. I don't see it through the rest of the New Testament. So if we take this as the grid and go back over the parable now, right, like a cipher key. I don't know if you know a cipher is the tool by which you can understand a coded word and make sense of it. So this cipher now, we're using it. It's clearly about believers and unbelievers. Then we go back. So the servants is the fact that all are servants of God because it's His creation. He's the master of it all. And all have to even account to Him the way they treat this world and how they live this life. Some will take the talents, and like I said, some will really get a great amount of the gospel. They'll have great, profound understanding of it. You realize the gospel is not just Jesus saves. It's the message of the Bible from Genesis to Revelation. Yeah, it doesn't end in the Gospels. Paul, Peter, John, James, Jude, the return of Christ, the end of things. It's all the gospel too. It's all connected together. And some get it. They get all 5 of them, those talents, if you will. And they share the gospel. And many get saved. And some have a bit more simple understanding of the gospel. That's okay because they still make it worthy. They make it worth something. They still make more. But then there's the other ones who just throw it away. So this parable does not seem to be about the fact of disciples using their gifts in the church, but more are we using the gospel to make more disciples? Or are we throwing it away? Are we ready to make an account of God and how we grasp hold of this gospel, or how we just put it in the ground? Again, not you'll lose your salvation, but it was that question, were you ever saved to begin with? If you didn't see the treasure of the gospel, to the point of wanting to share it to others, there's a problem. Now, like I said, my point is not to attack, but to say, read the text, walk through it, and see for yourself. And this note, I do want to encourage you. Go deeper into the greatness of the gospel. Read good books that go into depth of what is this amazing grace. And then share it even more. Because once you see how rich it is, you even more want to share it with others. On that note, brothers and sisters, be blessed.